Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlot Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel, and I'm today joined by two co-hosts whose deaths I've been dreaming of for a very long time. This is Sam Meltzer and Tanner Dykstra, and we're here to talk about the latest and greatest from Bong Joon-ho, Mickey 17.
Greatest.
And we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. Of course, if you have seen this movie and want to talk to us about it, you can leave your thoughts in the comment section, or you can do our Discord server where we're going to be talking about Mickey 17 and many other movies. But today, Tanner, we are joined by a guest here on the channel on the review.
And I'm real. I'm not fictitious.
This is a real guy.
Time.
I can poke him in the shoulder.
That's right. He's not just a picture in a box this time.
Yeah, nope. As far as I know, actual guy.
Actual guy.
Sam, what do you think of Mickey 17?
Honestly, I went in knowing zero about the movie other than it was sci-fi and dystopian.
Yeah.
And it had Robert Pattinson in it. And I was saying that I think it's smart that even though it was kind of purely coincidental and there were some accidents along the way, that Bong Joon-ho would wait 6 years to release his next movie. Mm-hmm. Because when you put out Parasite and you win 5 Oscars, you kind of have to let it sit. You know, that was a big deal. And this is no Parasite, obviously.
Well, yes.
But I don't think many films that have been released within the last 10 years are.
Or within the last 100 years.
Yeah, maybe ever. But it was fun. I definitely got annoyed at times. There was a bit of an eye-rolling sense of humor throughout. It had that cynical, self-referential humor that I hate. But it was mellow. It was kind of flowy and fun and tonally assured. And because it's a Bong Joon-ho movie, it looks amazing. It sounds really good. The shot composition is really good. It's a very handsomely produced movie. And Robert Pattinson is very handsome.
Well,
so there was
he's
a lot of
he's a handsomely printed gentleman.
There was a lot to look at on screen that was nice.
Yeah.
And it was fun. It didn't feel too serious or assured in the narrative. But once you kind of accept that, it's easy to have fun with it.
Yeah. Okay.
Tanner, how do you feel?
So, I wish I could say that I was very excited for this, and I was hoping to really enjoy this, and unfortunately, I just kind of didn't. There was just something about it that I just could never really sink my teeth or my claws into this. I have teeth and claws.
Sure. You do.
Yeah. I think it's the structure of the film. The narrative structure is something that really threw me for a loop. And I could never get a handle on it, I feel like. We'll talk about how the story sort of is laid out, of course, but for me, I don't know. It had too many. It never got into a rhythm for me, I think, is the main thing. And I understand that the book it's based on, Mickey 7, we had to add 10 more Mickeys for this film, is also laid out in a similar fashion where the structure is very non-linear in that way. And I can understand that, but I just feel like in the act of adapting it, that perhaps Bong Joon-ho was a little, tied to the structure of the book and maybe not looking at how to lay it out most ardently and pleasingly for a narrative film. And of course, I have my standard my standard thumbs up. Robert Pattinson, very good. I generally like the cast. Bong Joon-ho is a good director, and he knows how to frame a shot and everything like that. But no, my main issue, I think, that I'll be sort of ringing throughout the entire review here is that, like, I don't know, there's something about the rhythms of this movie that didn't vibe with me.
Yeah, it's definitely wacky. It's definitely bold. It's definitely a movie that comes out of a guy wins Best Picture and Warner Brothers like, please make a movie for us. You won Best Picture, please. We will give you $100 million to do whatever. And he's like, you sure about that?
$100 million to do whatever?
And then he made Mickey 17, which is a movie that is comedically brash. It is really crazily edited. There's all sorts of stuff going on. It has all these ideas and crass humor and all. And I'm 80% of the way there on Mickey 17 for being something I really, really love. At the end of the day, I think it is a very, very good movie. I liked its comedy throughout. I like all the cast. I think the ideas and the imagery and the sci-fi concepts are super, super compelling. But my criticism is going to be levied at how much I cared less about the last act of this movie. That is
Okay.
compared to the first 2/3, so stock standard. So this is just how one of these, sci-fi movies ends. And I was like, you were setting up so many interesting tonal beats and pacing beats in this first 2/3, and then it's for me slows to a crawl in that last act. And I'm like, that's really, really disappointing.
Slows to a bit of a creep.
Whoa. I
Yeah.
just got chills. But I found that first 2/3 so compelling in terms of its themes and imagery and character interactions and stuff, and the dialogue is witty and the locations are interesting. That I at the end of the day, I really, really like this, and I think it's a movie that I will appreciate more on rewatches, as it's very complicated and there are a lot of themes it's trying to tackle, and it doesn't nail all of them, and a lot of ideas that it sets up that I'm like, it kind of pays that off, but it's so ambitious and ridiculous that it's so cool that this got made, and I had a grand old time watching it.
Okay. Gentlemen, where would we like to dive in here?
What aspects stood out to you the most, whether that's good or bad, Sam?
Well, I mean, the visual effects are great.
Yeah.
It sounds really good.
Yeah.
I really liked Toni Collette.
Okay.
I thought she was the best performance. Mark Ruffalo and the whole Trump thing
Sure.
didn't work for me.
Let's focus on the supporting cast.
Okay.
then.
Let's talk about him. Let's talk about our Pats here. Let's talk about Robbie Pattinson. In his I don't even know how to extrapolate it out. He's technically only in two roles, but I mean, he's in 17
Concurrently.
roles if we really want to go there.
Yeah.
But no, like, he's good. And, when you first saw that trailer however many months ago and he busts out the Mickey 17 voice, you're like, oh, all right, okay, he's going for something odd here. He's going for something different, and he's quite good. I especially love the interplay he has with himself in the movie. He, because they set up this thing about how all the Mickeys are the same and have the same memories, but then they complicate it by, Mickey 3 was like kind of stupid and Mickey 10 was like forgetful or whatever. And what you have here is Mickey 17 seems to be the more stock standard, meek, shy, unassured, clumsy, sort of, affable Mickey. And Mickey 18, the new copy of him that is made after if they believe Mickey 17 has died, is more brash, aggressive, take charge. And the interplay between those two characters is quite strong. I mean, you get most of that in the second act of the movie. I had honestly wished for more, perhaps introducing more Mickeys to the mix if we really want to go crazy. But like the second act of it, when they are sort of having to do a almost comedy of errors thing of running around, he turns the corner and somebody thinks that they just saw him, or that kind of classic comedic thing. It works very well, and Robert Pattinson is very good at it.
Yeah, and what's especially impressive is how he's able to, just through body language and like the look in his eyes, portray these two characters very differently. And one thing that I was initially confused about is how different they are. But I do think that thematically and performance-wise, that is a very good call. But at first I was like, you're technically you're like the same person like 2 hours apart. Like, why are you so different? But I do think that the idea, and look, I can spin it any which way, sci-fi horse shit in my mind.
Of course.
The fucking fluid that made him the 18th time was a little bit different, and that gave him a little bit of an angry tinge. It doesn't really matter. But I think the idea of both these people who have almost entirely the same memory, but their personalities are just slightly different because of these slightly different things they've experienced, I think brings in really interesting themes of identity and the way that our memories shape us and the way that we interact with others. And so I was really compelled by watching the two of them that should be very similar diverge as the movie goes on, and as they start to like fill in their roles and like get used to one another, but like learn things about one another. I did find that really compelling. And Robert Pattinson, I think it's an impressive acting feat that a guy that we've seen in so many different kinds of roles is able to lean into two of his strengths here. He's able to lean into being this nerdy, small, like kind of annoyingly, but also kind of charming guy. And then also with Mickey 18, kind of fill up the scene, choose scenery a little bit, act aggressive and corny and stuff. I think that balance is really fascinating. What do you think of the Mickeys?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't take as much from the movie thematically as you did.
I got more. I got way more.
Yeah, I kind of just accepted that it was a little stupid and go right for it. It felt kind of like a free for all at times.
Yeah.
And
The cat is distracting you.
Oh dear.
the cat is distracting me.
Hi, buddy.
So
Hello.
what I will say is that, yeah, I mean, they obviously pay, you know, a little bit of lip service to the fact that the Mickeys can come out a little differently every time, and they don't necessarily explain why. A lot of the sci-fi elements of this film can go unexplained, or
Yeah,
either
yeah.
there are times as well where they really go through pains to overly explain something that doesn't necessarily need to be explained in depth. Perhaps the concept of a translator is really hammered on a number of times. But anyway, yeah,
I don't know. I just couldn't take the movie seriously from the beginning.
Yeah.
So I sort of accepted that after a certain point, and that's when I could enjoy it more.
Yeah.
But the movie just has that very
Just ignore him. Just ignore him. He's gonna rub his
that
head
very
away.
self-referential, cynical thing that a lot of like genre movies these days have, and I usually would be more critical of it, but because I trust Bong Joon-ho and because he seems to be more assured in what he's doing, I was able to enjoy it. But generally, that's a big problem I have with contemporary mainstream movies.
No, see, Sam, this is where I disagree. I find the film overtly earnest as opposed to being overtly cynical. And maybe it's just a difference of having consumed, you know, your mainstream cynical blockbusters far more than you have.
That's true.
But
That's
like
true. avoid them.
I found this one pointedly earnest in the ways it, you know, displays its humor and whatnot. Of course, I think you have a point in the satirization that it does.
Yeah.
Which is obviously quite cynical about the modern age, the political landscape, the capitalist landscape, everything like that. But in terms of the actual characterization for Mickey, for Nasha, and other characters involved here, I found it quite earnest.
I thought the characterization of Mark Ruffalo was actually weirdly earnest, too, because it just felt so on the nose and accepting of the don't look up Trumpian MAGA whatever narrative.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. It was almost like a weird liberal fantasy projection that Hollywood had there, which sounds weird coming from a Korean film, like that this is a Korean filmmaker.
But it's
I sense that a lot.
Oh no, definitely.
It's notable that this is, well, of course, Bong Joon-ho has made English language films before in Snowpiercer and Okja, which are also, you know, very pointed political commentary films. That this one is his first film after being like anointed by Hollywood, you know, after his Best Picture win. And I think you can feel the differences here. You know, this is also a film that comes out post the Trump era and everything like that, so obviously that informs it all as well. Okja was made in like 2016, came out in 2017, so it does not cast any aspersions in what it's about. I mean, even if you plug your ears for everything leading up to it, as soon as you see the group of people in red baseball caps crowding around Mark Ruffalo, you're like, okay, well, I can understand visually even what the metaphor is here.
Yeah, the movie is not subtle, and I think that you can apply that to its themes, to its visuals and stuff like that. Like this is it's comedy. It's a very in-your-face movie, and I think that's the reason why I'm actually surprised that it's received generally solid critical acclaim. It's got a very good Rotten Tomato score, and we'll see how audiences react to it. But I expect a very low cinema score because this movie is, I think, maybe from the trailers kind of presents as like this sci-fi blockbuster, but what it really is just like people kind of being annoying for 2 hours.
It has a zany sensibility to it. This is undeniable. It is very similar to Okja in that fashion, where it is not subtle. Not to say that Bong Joon-ho is like a master of subtlety in any
No,
regard.
Parasite is not subtle.
Exactly.
At all.
But it just comes across differently when it's in, your native language.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
For
So
sure.
maybe it would have benefited more from having an operatic tone and feeding into a soap opera narrative. Because I feel like it already chose to be unsubtle. It chose to be kind of zany and self-aware and referential and all of that. If it had a melodramatic core and it took bigger, broader swings in the emotions, I think it would have been more assured.
I agree that it doesn't do that. I don't necessarily know if I would have preferred it.
I think I would have.
Well, knowing the movies you like, yes, I understand that. But this movie is really tight in the characters that it gives deep characterization to, in the relationships that it explores. I was surprised by the end of the movie, and I actually will use this as a criticism, how few characters I felt like I understood and what their roles are.
I agree. I agree.
Like
honestly.
Mickey, I feel like
you got it.
We get
a
lot of.
Hey, he's the main character.
Yes, but we also get a lot of narration, and he's narrating his own thoughts as things are happening, and I think it's a really interesting creative choice for him to be externalizing those thoughts as he's going through all of these crazy things. And so that gives you a good insight into what he's worried about and how he feels about other characters and stuff. And so he's very solid. And maybe it's because Mickey is a very isolated person. He doesn't relate too heavily to the people around him. Even his relationship with Nasha, which I think they have good chemistry.
Yeah.
We don't see enough of them in the current timeline until they're forced back together by the multiples thing. Where I still felt like she was at arm's length, even though she was a character that I wanted to learn more about. And then and then everyone else, and of course there's the villains. There's Toni Collette and Mark Ruffalo, and I don't care that we don't really learn too much about them. I like that they're cartoonish
they are what they are on their face.
Absolutely.
They are better for being a clear, just a face of a satirization. That's the point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very much so. But then there are these B or C tier characters.
Like Steven Yeun.
Steven Yeun.
Oh, whose name is Timo.
Yeah, his name is Timo.
Incredible stuff.
But we're given nothing about him.
I agree.
He's in the opening scene too. And it just felt like his character was elusive and underwritten.
He is key to Mickey's backstory, his their motivation for going on this whole ship. And this is what my issue is, that I think the film is jumbled in its structure and moves way too quickly through some very key setup stuff. There's even characters someone who ends up being C tier, but then also very key to the end of the movie, this head of security character, and I don't know who the actor is.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, but, there's a couple characters that are important near the end of the movie. You're I don't really know who you are.
Guy
there's also this smaller scientist woman who is
oh yeah,
kind
with
of
the glasses.
Yeah, and she shows up in key sequences. I'm I don't know your name. I don't know what's going on. And so that, I think, to me, is why I think the movie feels a little bit complicated. Is I really like the core story. I really find Mickey's personality interesting. I find the sci-fi concepts interesting. But when they introduce these extra characters that fill in sequences, but then it toes the line, I think, in a not so great way with its screenplay.
It gets muddled.
Yeah, of having these characters, but wanting to do something with them, but not actually giving you enough to care about.
This is my whole meta narrative on the film. This is what I'll say. This ties into what I opened up my opening thoughts with the narrative structure of it being a real distancing factor for me. I feel like there is a better, stronger, longer, more structurally sound version of this film that existed at one point, but then we had some WB executives get their grubby little fingers on this, being because am I wrong in saying that it feels like a movie that should be much longer?
Yeah,
especially in the third act.
Yeah,
there are definitely scenes that feel either cut down or cut out.
This is what I'm talking about. It feels like a movie that was much longer. Warner Brothers took a look at this thing and was we can't put out a 2 hour and 45 minute movie, Bong, you're gonna have to re-edit this, and also to on Bong's part, being like, I want to stay true to the adaptation of this book that is very sort of irreverent and strangely structured, but I just don't know if you can carry that directly over to the film and make it have the same effect.
Sure. Yeah, and what we do know is that they had a hard time knowing what to do with
this. Was
movie.
delayed
and again,
like 3 or 4 times, which is what lends some credence to my theory. I feel like,
and so I think that's very, very possible. But again, that is why I'm expecting this movie to be divisive as more people get their eyes on it.
It is going to be divisive.
Because I think our crowd found it funny. We were getting
we
a
had
lot
some
of
laughs.
good laughs.
We had some laughs,
but it is a movie that that is so odd to get your footing on. And while I feel like I did, obviously Tanner, as a longtime movie watcher and a big film nerd, you weren't able to. So that is a barrier to entry. I think will stop a lot of people. But I also think another element that will make it kind of divisive is I don't think the ending is I think it's actually almost too satisfying. I think they tried to put too much of a nice little bow on it at the end. Because there is this epilogue after the third act sequence that is just a lot of big CGI monsters in the snow and all this stuff that I found not particularly compelling. There's this epilogue in which everything comes up daisies, and I'm just like, or is that the correct way to use that? I don't know, but it puts too nice of a bow on the end.
Yeah.
Well, the bad characters died, and the ones that you're supposed to like, they're getting along great, and everything's gonna, all the people and the aliens are happy together. I'm like, oh, let's that's the ridiculous, irreverent tone of the movie. I was surprised by how Hollywood the ending of this movie felt.
Yeah, it was too slick and clean and digital.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about the ending here. So, spoilers for Mickey 17. So after. Okay, I just want to talk about the whole third act because, like I said, the first. I'll rewind even further. Well, but I'll get there. I'll get there. I'll get there. The first act I didn't like too much. I thought the narration was too handholdy, too over-explainy. I would have just preferred it to be told to me chronologically. I think that much is clear. Second act I liked. I already talked about that. That's where the interplay is the strongest. That's where the intrigue, the running around, the structure and the reveals and everything. That's where they're the strongest. The third act. Let's start it where they get captured after the whole slicing open the giant rock thing. Yeah. That's when Steven Yeun shows back up and he's gonna chop them up, but then they break out, but then they're immediately captured again and they're taken into this sequence with Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette that goes on for a long time. This is a long sequence here where like 8 different plans are thrown out as to what to do with the creatures and what to do with the prisoners and what punishment should be reaped upon them and what their fate will be. It is a lot of like, we'll do this. No, let's do this. Now we're gonna shift over this way, which I get is like the point of this being a dysfunctional leadership structure and everything, but also makes for a huge like slamming the brakes in the third act of this movie.
Yeah.
And then, Tucker, you didn't like it too much. I kind of did like the outside the thing with all the alien creatures scuttling around kind of thing. It was very Nausicaa to me, Hayao Miyazaki Nausicaa stuff. With the communicating with the intelligent creatures and everything like that. I like that ending, but I feel like we don't get a satisfying end to an arc for Mickey 17, our main character. I feel like he loses a little bit of agency in this last act.
He actually doesn't really do much as
my
the movie
point
ends. Which
my
is interesting.
point.
Yeah, I didn't really think of it that way. It's difficult to know what his goal is outside of self-preservation and therefore self-actualization. I think for me, what is compelling about Mickey as a character across all versions of him is that because he's an expendable, because he's being reprinted and has this really uncomfortable relationship with death and the role that he's been put into, he doesn't really know how he fits into this culture, how he relates to other people, and I find that really compelling. I think that's great. But then Mickey 17, as the movie's starting to wrap up, his goal is then to protect humanity and like make sure that the humans and the aliens can like don't kill each other. It's not mutual destruction or whatever. And he kind of does that, but it's really Nasha and 18
Yes.
that actually make the plan follow through. And so he's kind of just standing there getting pushed around in the snow
I
for
agree.
like the last 10 minutes.
I think
of the
it's
movie.
a weird thing to do to like take away his arc, like to because that is like the whole point of the movie, is that he is a pushover. He's a doormat. He does not have any agency. He needs to stand up for himself, and then he doesn't really do that at the end. We just let some other characters take the reins again. I don't know. I was really preparing myself for this to be obviously quite different tonally than what like an American director would do with this story. Just because, you know, coming from different cinematic backgrounds and everything like that. That is how Bong Joon-ho or any other international director would handle this story differently than the American director would. But I don't know. There is a line between having tonal differences and then just being kind of poorly structured or poorly written from that standpoint. It is, of course, going for some zaniness, as we've already established, but I think sometimes it can have its tone get in the way of like sound character moments.
Yeah. What did you think of this third act, Sam?
I just thought it was silly, and I was having fun with it, but then it kept going.
Yeah, it's
like
very
the
long.
last 10 minutes in particular just
long,
could have been 1 minute.
Mm.
It overstayed its welcome. And again, we had a whole argument about this, but this movie has that awkward runtime of being like between
what is it?
It's like a 2 hour 10 minute.
It's like 2:17, I think. Is
right,
what it is.
exactly.
Yeah,
and it's just and that's what I'm saying. Like you feel it at the end there.
Yeah, I can understand.
It could have been tighter.
Well, definitely. And one sequence, especially near the end, that I definitely think should have been cut down. It's this weird dream sequence with Toni Collette.
Thank you.
That's what
Thank you.
saying.
They're like this
Stupid.
epilogue. Because what happens before that? How do we transition into that? Because they're at the ceremony. They're gonna blow up the cloning machine,
and then we get a reflection back to after Mark Ruffalo dies, but then we kind of go forward. There's like a like spiral thing where like we're here and then we go back and then we kind of continue forward and then we jump all the way forward.
Exactly. It's
really weird.
Yeah. Again, I think it's an issue of Bong being very tied to the source material here.
Yeah, which none of us are familiar with.
Exactly. that definitely feels like a thing that happened in the book and like is meant to throw the reader for a loop. And then is resolved as like, you know, it is the final moment of actualization for Mickey. But here it rings hollow. It is confusing, A, and also B, rings hollow at the end. He's like, you know what? Fuck you. I'm not scared of you anymore. I am a real man now. I'm a real boy. And you're like, I don't know. Is there anything in the previous 25 minutes that supports that? I'm not really sure there is.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about Mickey in his self-actualization is I do think that for me, I found it a really compelling stand-in for a lot of themes. I think that
yes.
things that it establishes at the beginning with how complicated the idea of multiples is, and
yes, I agree.
The philosophy that goes into that, and the ethics, and the ways that people abuse technology and the scientific process, I think is especially interesting. This is a crazy reference, but a review that we did for the Palme d'Or winner, The Silent World, which is a documentary about the silent process and how dangerous.
I literally started watching that yesterday.
Oh, okay, yeah, but how dangerous and how it can go wrong. This is a perfect example of that, of people abusing the scientific process and it being very dangerous and like can be a slippery slope. I think it's really fascinating that for me, that's the thematic note that this movie is aiming towards, is like the ways that people can abuse technology or abuse their power to take advantage of systems and things. But then when we land on Mickey's self-actualization as a person and his identity, it does end up stumbling at the end. I think there's interesting ideas that it's gearing towards, as Mickey as 17 is conflicted about the jealousy that he feels towards 18, and having 18 is him, and he has these elements inside of him, and he sees those externalized in 18, and he's like, this guy's a psychopath, this guy's a jerk, this guy's a womanizer, this guy wants to kill Duncan Weatherby.
He wants to kill everybody.
Yeah, but the themes of that, I think, especially reflected in that first character, the scientist who was using multiples, is the
Mhm.
idea is that that's all inside of him somewhere. And how
Yeah.
does he feel about that? And he's seeing it actualized, and then he's kind of like, no, that's not a part of me. But then he kind of has to accept that's a part of him. It is interesting, and I think that is solidly self-actualized. But in terms of the character's actions, I don't think that it
Yeah,
necessarily plays
Tucker,
together.
you bring up great ideas that in retrospect you're like, yeah, that is present in the movie. Because by the end of the movie, you do forget the thing about like the scientist who invented cloning, who cloned himself to kill homeless people or whatever.
Yeah, that's a crazy plot line.
Exactly. You forget about it at the end. It's like, yeah, I guess that is something that that was meant to be carried as a plot line throughout, as a thematic, sort of thread. But again, I think the movie it moves very quickly and
Yeah.
gives you a lot of material that by the end you can lose some of these threads. And I don't think that even the film itself ends up, bringing them back up to it in a satisfying way.
Yeah, and I think there's actually a lot of I think you're right. I think there's a lot of ideas that this movie either establishes early on, or frankly, sometimes establishes late on. That I'm
Well, yeah.
okay, I like these things. I think they're very interesting. We never really actually learn about what the board and the voting process of all this
Yeah.
stuff is, that then they spring on you at the very end, like, oh, and Nasha ran for the freaking board.
She's
and
the head of the
I was
she's
like,
the head of the
ridiculous.
council. What council? Where?
What are you talking
Is the
about?
council
And
on the
she
ship?
won
Is
in a
the
landslide. I knew she could do it.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
she's very
It's
good at
ridiculous.
convincing people.
Yeah, but that is something that I find compelling about this sci-fi generation ship establishing a colony on a new planet, a
Mhm.
planet that is supposed to be pure and is run by this guy that is
Mhm.
a religious and political figure. Like, there is a lot of themes here, but they never fully explore any of them. And I think for me, I find the concept so interesting that I don't particularly mind that they are not fully explored, because they then key me into thinking about these things, and I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, I want to rewatch it and think about it from this different angle. But on a screenwriting level, I do think that it is muddled and stumbling over itself. Too many ideas, too many actually, let's do a joke here. Let's do an action sequence here.
Yeah.
Let's do a slapstick comedy
It
thing
rambles.
here. Yeah.
And it doesn't really stop itself. It doesn't know
Which is
when to end.
again my whole issue with the film is that it does not feel tight in any regard.
No.
It doesn't feel like it has a sure footing at really any point in its
Yeah.
runtime. It gets
It's
closest.
the megalopolis of 2025.
And I do hate to compare, but Parasite is known for being tight
Yes.
and
Yes,
assured.
it
So-
has a great place, a great bit of onboarding, and then taking you off at the end too. It is that is the whole genius of that script, of course, and this is kind of the exact opposite in a lot of ways, which is interesting. It's very audacious. It's going for a lot.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is ultimately why I end up appreciating it. I'm like, clearly Bong Joon-ho wanted to make this movie, and he has these ideals and ideas of something being wacky and kind of unapproachable that he's just really passionate about.
Mhm.
It feels like a $100 million passion project, like comparisons of movies that in different permutations we all like.
Mhm.
Like
I heard
Babylon,
you
like
name drop
Megalopolis.
Megalopolis. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think that the comparisons of big budget passion projects that are
Mhm.
kind of messy but audacious I think it's an apt comparison.
Mhm.
Yeah. But unfortunately, they are box office poison.
Yes,
well.
yeah, and so we'll see. Well,
Yeah.
this is going to make more money than Babylon and Megalopolis.
Yeah.
Probably in its opening weekend, it might beat them both combined.
You know what? Tucker, that's a great point, actually.
Before
based-
people realize that
yeah.
it's weird.
Based
it's
purely
opening weekend.
on Bong Joon-ho's name
Yeah.
recognition and everything like that, which is something that cannot be discounted, and I'll be very interested to see what he does from here. Oh, I know what he's doing from here. He's doing an animated movie about sea creatures. Cool, man. Right on.
Yeah, he can do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I am curious for the two of you who seem to be coming down a little bit on the movie, a little bit softer than I am. Are there any moments, ideas, sequences that you really did like?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed watching the film.
Yeah.
I had fun watching it. I really did like the caricature that Toni Collette had. I thought she was so funny,
The sauces.
so expressive, so unique, so memorable. That's what I mean by it needed to be operatic and more melodramatic, because she had the tone.
She had that
wanted.
in her, yeah.
But you guys are going in depth about all of these ideas and deconstructing it, and I just don't even have the passion or enthusiasm to go there. I just didn't think of this movie nearly as deeply.
Yeah.
I just thought it was kind of a restless sci-fi fun thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's fair.
That I see Bong Joon-ho there because it's very well framed and very well made, but overall I didn't take away much, but I also don't know if I was meant to be profoundly impacted by this.
No, yeah.
So
I'm
letting it slide there.
I think it's Bong having fun with these ideas, like he had,
I'm
like
gonna laugh at it.
like he's doing with Okja, or like he's kind of even doing with Snowpiercer. Snowpiercer is a little, well, actually, quite a bit darker than like Okja, which is kind of like a kid's film, and darker than this even. But like the ideas in play there are even a little zanier, but executed on differently. Like the idea of them, mashing up bugs and making that into jelly for people to eat, or having children below the floorboards like running fixing the train. Like he does operate in these ideas quite well. He when he goes down this route, he has a very particular tone that he likes to explore. And I think it's done better in those other two, and I can't really point to why. It might be a matter of, again, the adaptation issue that I've pointed to a number of times. But Tucker, to answer your question, I will say that the multiples ideal I like a lot. That is the maybe only example of me being like, oh, this is a really interesting idea, actually. Not the political side to it, of course, is perhaps not as well explored, but even Mickey 17 and Mickey 18 having this common recognition that, like, if one of us dies, then that's kind of it for us.
Yeah.
Like
because there becomes a me versus a them, which I think is really, really fascinating, because to that point, because of the memory backups, Mickey is Mickey.
Yeah.
He's reprinted, but he recalls his deaths. He recalls the things that he's experienced, and there's never been a split. And then it, of course, lightly brings in these elements of soul and religion and identity that I think it toys with. Doesn't go as deep as I maybe would have wanted. Maybe there's a little bit too serious of themes to explore in a movie in which they're just like cursing and like there's blood and all this stuff. But I really like the moment when they first like argue and come to a recognition of this, and it's going through my mind of the sequence I really like, and I think you probably feel the same way, Tanner, of when they are split up and 18 shares a moment with Nasha that 17 does not, and 17 has to go through this whole fucking thing with the
dinner,
like, weird steak and all that. Oh, that's a great scene.
Yeah, his human growth hormone steak, and then his Purple Joe painkiller and everything.
That dinner scene was one of my favorite parts. For sure.
But that immediately, I'm like, they've experienced different things now, and the idea of then if that person dies, that they are different people at that point. And I do want to bring up something I find really fascinating, and why I think maybe I'm more keyed into this idea of memories and identity that I find really compelling, is this is also the exact same thing that Severance covers. It's the idea of memories being the thing that forms a person. And even if you are in the same body and share the same physical presence, it is your personality shaped by your memories that really makes you who you are.
Tucker, do you think there's anything to the capitalistic connection between those two works? Corporations making multiples of somebody to exploit them. I don't know. Maybe that's too big of a stretch. I'm joking, of course. That's exactly what they're going for.
Yeah.
A lot of movies lately this decade, always, but really this decade, are about the transferal of the body and occupying a different space with the same mind.
Human body as a currency in the capitalist machine.
It's really been done a lot, and I think that has to do a lot with AI and transhumanism and all of that.
The general direction that the country is traveling in. Anyway, anything else? I said a couple of times that the movie never really finds its footing. I should bench that a little bit. I think that in that second act, in the scenes that we're talking about, Tucker, the dinner scene, when they both interact with Nasha, that's where I'm like, okay, we found it. This is it, here. We're in it.
Totally. Yeah, and I think it that is where I feel it being cut down the most,
Mhm.
because there are these ideas of love triangle and this dynamic with this character Kai, who's
Yep.
not really explored, who I think is interesting.
She
but
just really just drops out of the movie
no,
at
she
a certain
completely
point.
disappears.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, where is this going to go? The truth is nowhere. But I think there are scenes that are set up that I could watch a Mickey 17 show that is all about them
Yeah.
trying to hide the fact that
It
there are
feels-
multiples and like
Yeah,
having this weird like open relationship dynamic and all this stuff, and like their personalities diverging, and how does 18 and 17, but then as soon as 18 grabs the pistol, you're like, okay, we're done. Like
that's it.
We're barreling towards the third act at this point.
That's kind of my thing. I will. The last thing I'll say is on the note of humor. I was laughing a good bit. Don't get me wrong. It just didn't. It was just another element that wasn't fully clicking for me every single time. Do it.
It has such a particular humor style.
It does, and
Yeah.
I'm not one of who's opposed to being like sophomoric toilet humor isn't funny, full stop. But like they lay it on a little thick at points.
It just
where,
felt
like,
random.
Yeah,
more than over being instead of being crude, it just felt random.
Just because Mickey says the word burp or fart doesn't make it necessarily funny,
No.
Yeah. For me, just to mention a couple things that I really liked, I found the imagery and a number of shot composition to be really, really fascinating. There's a moment that like really took my breath away in the beginning when Mickey's applying to be an expendable, and he's in this massive atrium of this spiraling thing that is covered by glass on the outside, but there's this wave and sandstorm like crazy force of nature like
bearing
bashing
down
up
outside,
and you're looking up at this spiraling staircase of people, and I'm like, this is incredible imagery, like just really, really striking to me. And I felt those same moments in the sequence when Mickey and Nasha meet for the first time, and they're like all this like jabbering and people jumping up and down, like yeah, Marshall, and they're like communicating to one another, but we don't get to hear their dialogue. And I think it was a really compelling sequence. As they are talking to one another and having this moment, but we only get to see the acting on their face as they see a connection in each other, and then it's intercut with this sex scene that they're sharing
with them
as they're
banging it out.
The fact that that sex should not be had because it wastes too much calories.
There was a literal Challengers moment.
I will compliment how horny everybody is for Mickey 17. Everybody wants to fuck Mickey. They want to fuck both Mickeys if they can.
Yeah, ideally. And then I also really liked the I did like the scene when 18 attempts to kill Marshall. This like cutting open of the giant black diamond and this pigeon guy doing all this stuff.
Yeah, what
and all the people
the pigeon guy
swarming and stuff and overreacting to this alien. That I think that whole element of the fear of the unknown,
the charismatic reality show leader of this thing getting grazed by a bullet. Interesting.
Well, obviously that was not included as of last year, but
interesting though.
But I really liked that sequence because it was chaotic, but it felt focused to me. I'm like, I get what this scene is going for, and
it's precisely where I think we fall out of it, is immediately following.
Yeah. And especially in like these shots of like people trampling Mickey and this whole slapstick sequence.
He's chasing the little grub guy around,
and the shot of all the guards like shooting their pistols over and over again at this alien. I'm like, these are really striking moments of like there's slow motion and the sound design's coming in and out, and I'm like, this feels it's crazy at face value. Everything that's happening, they're on this ship and they're eating this sludge, and there are these weird aliens that are helpful, and the leader is this guy who's running a talk show that everyone's like, yeah. And I'm like, this is crazy, but I find these shots to be so beautiful and the themes that it's covering to be so compelling. Unfortunately, it does, as I said, for me, lose a lot of that steam and does not bring its ideas together in that third act. But as I mentioned earlier, I think it's a movie that I will really appreciate as I rewatch it and learn to get even closer to on its own level, which I was very much on its level for a lot of it, but I think it has so many ideas that I like so much, and so much imagery and characterization that I find so fascinating, that it is a movie that I really did connect to. and I was continually like fascinated by the things that it was so crazily and audaciously attempting, and not necessarily always succeeding to try and cover.
Yeah. I'll just say that, there's not a lot in it that I outright didn't like. There's a couple things. Where I'm like, I'm not liking this. But again, it's maybe material that should have been expounded upon in a better version of this movie that I would have liked a little bit more, appreciated a little bit more.
Mickey 17 HBO Max show adaptation.
Yeah, or just a longer version of the movie is what I like. A 2:45, a 3-hour version of this movie is perfectly fine with me. And all the things you're talking like, I don't dislike that he has a talk show. I don't dislike the production design. I don't dislike any of the themes that are in play here. I like these ideas, but it's the format that it's the casing that they've been injected into that is flawed, in my opinion.
That they've been printed into.
Well, very good.
Whoa. Tanner, what are you going to give this movie out of 10?
God, Tucker, that's a great question. I'm hovering.
Sam, you don't need to give a score, by the way.
I'm hovering.
You don't need to give a score, by the way.
I'm hovering around like the 5 to 6 range. I'm gonna go with a 6. I'm gonna go with like a low 6. I'm gonna say like a 6.1.
Sure. It's around there for me too. It's like mid, but more positive than negative.
Yeah. I did really like it, as I've been saying, and I think it's a movie that will have a lot of stuff for people to talk about.
Yeah.
If they can connect to it, if they can deal with its sense of humor and its uneasy and uneven screenwriting. So I'm gonna say an 8.3. I really did like it, and it's definitely a weird follow up to a phenomenal Best Picture winner.
Yes.
But I appreciate that Bong Joon-ho's kind of given carte blanche.
You gotta take a hard turn out of that, as we already discussed.
Yeah. But thank you, both of you, for joining me for this review. Thank you, everyone, for watching us talk about this movie very much in depth. And we will see you guys in a couple of years for the next Bong Joon-ho.
Oh, hey.
Wow.